Welcome to VSOW. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a life and career that really defied any simple definition. We're talking about Rick James.
Yeah, and when you look at the sources we've got for this deep dive,
Yeah.
you realize pretty quickly you're dealing with someone who is just this, like, supernova of musical talent and charisma.
Mm.
But his story is also really deeply tangled up with, personal struggles and a lot of turmoil. We've got biographical info, stuff covering his early life and his rise.
Right.
And there's a really insightful review that gets into his classic album, Street Songs. Plus, perspectives from fans, critics, even a recent documentary that takes a pretty unflinching look at his later years and his legacy.
So our mission today is basically to sift through all this material. We want to pull out the most important threads, the surprising details, maybe some conflicting viewpoints, just to build a fuller picture. We want to understand Rick James not just as the musician, the guy who gave us those undeniable funk hits, but also as the complex cultural figure he was. His music endures, sometimes maybe despite his complicated life, sometimes maybe as a raw reflection of it.
Exactly.
So we're going to guide you, the listener, through these sources, highlighting what really jumps out.
Okay, so let's start at the start, like the sources do. James Ambrose Johnson, Jr., born February 1st, 1948, in Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo roots.
Yeah. Grew up in a big family, third of 8 kids, and the sources talk about this strict Catholic upbringing, single mother running the household. It sort of paints a picture of maybe a structured start that contrasts with the wild energy he became known for later.
And music was clearly there from the beginning. It wasn't just something he liked, it was kind of in the blood, right? The sources make a point of mentioning his uncle, Melvin Franklin.
The bass voice from the Temptations.
Exactly, a huge Motown legend. That connection feels pretty significant, especially considering where Rick himself ended up.
Oh, absolutely. And that musical connection, it seems like it showed up early. He wasn't waiting around. He was apparently singing on street corners in Buffalo when he was pretty young.
Yeah.
Already showing that drive, wanting to perform, pursue music.
But the path wasn't, straight to the recording studio.
No, far from it. There's this unexpected turn in 1964. He joins the U.S. Naval Reserve.
Okay.
But his time there was short, and it ended dramatically. He went AWOL, absent without leave.
Wow.
Yeah, he actually fled the country, headed north to Canada,
Yeah.
Toronto specifically. And that's where he started using a different name, Ricky Matthews, probably trying to lay low.
And that time in Toronto, even though he was technically a fugitive, it turned out to be really important for his music.
Totally pivotal. He formed his first major band there, the Minor Birds. And the lineup, I mean, when you look back at who was in that band, it's kind of astonishing.
Who are we talking about?
Well, Neil Young and Bruce Palmer, who'd go on to form Buffalo Springfield.
No way.
Yeah. And Nick St. Nicholas, who later joined Steppenwolf. Just incredible talent all in one place early on.
That's wild. And the sources say the Minor Birds actually recorded for Motown, his uncle's label.
They did. They cut material from Motown. But that album, it never came out.
Why not? What happened?
Well, a couple things, according to the sources. There was some business trouble. Sounds like they got swindled by their manager.
Ugh, classic story.
Right. But the real deal breaker, the thing that killed the Motown release, was when the label found out Rick was AWOL. They weren't about to release an album by someone wanted by the Navy.
Okay, that makes sense. So the Canadian escape couldn't last. He comes back to the U.S. in '68, and then he has to face the music, so to speak.
Yeah, he did. He served time for desertion, put a pause on everything musical for a bit. After he served his time, he tried to get the Minor Birds going again, but it just didn't happen.
So what then?
Well, the sources say he kind of pivoted. He went behind the scenes at Motown, working as a writer and producer, under a different name again, Terry Johnson.
Back at Motown, but not as the star yet. That's interesting. Who was he working with them?
He worked with some big names, actually. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles,
Hmm.
Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers, the Spinners. So he was definitely learning the ropes, soaking up that Motown sound from the inside.
Building experience.
For sure. Then, another move. 1969, he heads west to Los Angeles. And this L.A. period, the sources describe it as, well, a bit of a struggle, a grind.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Playing bass in different bands, but nothing really took off.
Pretty much. Bands like Salt and Pepper and, the sources are quick to say not Salt and Pepper.
Right. Good clarification.
Heaven and Earth, Great White Cane, and even an early version of the Stone City Band, which would become his main backing band later.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly short-lived stuff, struggling bands. It shows it wasn't like instant success after he got back. Took persistence.
Definitely laying groundwork.
Yeah, a lot of playing, writing, trying to find that right sound, that right group. But eventually, that L.A. hustle led him back to Motown again. The sources say he left L.A., went back to Motown in '77, this time with a clear goal: launch a solo career.
Okay, so this is the turning point. The start of Rick James as we know him.
This is it. He came back with a concept, developed that signature gritty funk sound, and his debut album for Motown, Come Get It, that was the key. It wasn't just a debut. It, immediately shot him to stardom.
And the big single from that was You and I.
That was a breakthrough, yeah. Massive hit, signaled his arrival. And there was another track on that first album that really cemented his unique style and themes.
Let me guess.
Mary Jane.
You got it. Mary
Yeah.
Jane became a huge fan favorite.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's widely understood. One source even mentions Ice Cube, confirming it from his perspective, that it's a pretty direct nod to marijuana. Ice Cube apparently said it showed him how much you could really say in a song, how direct you could be.
He really quickly established this whole persona, didn't he? The wild brand of danceable funk music.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And the look was just as important as the sound. The sources talk about the braids, obviously, the flashy, flamboyant costumes. One source even said his outfits wouldn't look out of place in, like the glam rock scene happening around then.
That visual style, plus what the sources call his wild excess, it drew comparisons to people like George Clinton and Funkadelic, right? The whole theatrical funk thing.
Definitely. He wasn't just making songs. He was creating this whole larger-than-life persona, this experience.
And that mix, the raw funk, the energy, the look, earned him that nickname, the King of Punk Funk.
It fit perfectly, didn't it? That rebellious edge mixed with just undeniable groove.
And he kept the momentum going after the debut. The sources mention more albums quickly after, in '79.
Right. Fire It Up and Bustin' Out of L7. Both popular, kept the hits coming. Showed he wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was consistent.
But if there's one album that really defines his peak, the one everyone points to.
It has to be the 1981 release, Street Songs.
Yeah, all the sources seem to agree on that one. It's the landmark.
No question. It was his biggest seller, commercially huge. And the reviews, the critical acclaim, matched it. The sources call it a Motown classic. That's high praise.
And it's not just looking back. The fan comments in the sources, even now they call it a masterpiece, essential listening. One reviewer called it a relentless scorcher, just pure energy.
So let's dig into what makes Street Songs so special, according to these sources. The sound is consistently described as, well, peak danceable funk, built on these infectious beats and rhythms.
And specific things get called out again and again. The hand claps driving the beat. Rick's voice, which is so distinctive. The brass section, really punchy and funky. And maybe most important, the bass lines.
Yeah, his bass playing gets highlighted a lot. One source calls him very capable, but really they all emphasize how crucial his bass is. It just holds the whole thing together. It gives it that groove you can't resist. The brass is like the spice on top.
And his voice is described as fun. It turns these tracks into funky masterpieces. There's also that interesting point about the songs being deceptively simple.
Right. Like, on the surface, maybe straightforward.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on in the groove, the arrangement. It's crafted.
And then there's the monster track from that album, the one everyone knows.
Super freak.
Has to be. Biggest hit off the album, Grammy nominated. And the sources have that great detail about it being added, like right at the last second.
Yeah, apparently. Which is wild, because can you even imagine Street Songs without it now?
Not really. The sound is just iconic. That bass line, simple but unforgettable, great dance track. And the sources mention those little vocal bits from Rick that give it so much character.
Like when he yells "Temptation Sing" before the deep voice comes in.
Yeah, or setting up the sax solo with Blow Daddy. Little things like that just make the track.
And that deep-voiced backup singer, he wasn't just on Super Freak. The sources mention him on other tracks too, like Give It To Me Baby and Ghetto Life. One reviewer joked that, every good funk song needs one, kind of like George Clinton stuff.
It's true. And the legacy of Super Freak, obviously huge. Maybe most famously because of MC Hammer's Can't Touch This, right? That sample brought the bass line to a whole new generation.
Absolutely massive. But it's important, and the sources point this out, that Super Freak isn't universally loved without reservation, particularly among some black scholars.
Oh, interesting. What's the criticism?
Well, they're described as feeling it's not really representative of the whole album's vibe,
Yeah.
And they criticize its cultural impact, calling it a white frat boy anthem, which adds this layer of complexity. It suggests maybe the song's massive crossover success kind of diluted or overshadowed his broader artistic message for some people.
That's a really interesting perspective. Beyond Super Freak, though, Street Songs had other big singles. Give It To Me Baby was another huge one.
Yeah, very popular. And again, the sources point to that strong bass line and the presence of that deep-voiced backup singer as key ingredients to its success,
Yeah.
very much in that signature street song style.
Then there's Ghetto Life, which seems like a shift in theme.
Definitely. Here, Rick's trying to bring in something more serious, more political maybe, reflecting on, living in the ghetto, the hardships. But the sources show different takes on how well that worked.
How so?
One reviewer felt the political message was a bit half-baked, maybe simplistic. Felt those tracks didn't quite hit the same mark as the funk tunes and the ballads.
Okay. But there was another view.
Yeah, another source argued that his stories about growing up on the streets were actually pretty much unmatched at that time, that they had a raw authenticity that really connected.
Musically, though, how does Ghetto Life hold up in the reviews?
Musically, it seems to get more consistent praise. Funky bass, good singing, hot brass. The feeling seems to be even if you question the political depth, the song works musically. It delivers the funk.
And one source threw out that idea, maybe speculation, that the themes in this song, police, life in the hood, might have influenced later G-Funk artists.
Yeah, it was floated as a possibility. Not definitive, but it makes you think about his potential influence down the line.
Another track tackling a serious issue was Mr. Policeman, right? About police brutality.
Yes. And again, varied reactions in the sources. One reviewer found it a little simplistic, called it an average song, maybe lacking the fun or musical punch of others.
But fans felt differently.
Well, one fan comment specifically mentioned liking Tina Marie's contribution to that track, so different elements resonated with different listeners, even if critics weren't blown away.
And there's that historical context point, too. One source claiming James was tackling police brutality way before most hip-hop artists made it a central theme.
Right, suggesting that regardless of the musical reception, he was addressing important, tough issues pretty early on in mainstream music.
So besides the funk and the social commentary, Street Songs also had ballads, showcasing a different side, like Fire and Desire with Tina Marie.
Yeah, that's a big one. It shifts gears. Less heavy funk, more focus on the singing, the emotion. And one reviewer was actually really surprised by Rick singing on it. Said he was really belting out his part, telling this story of a misguided past. Found it impressive.
And the duet itself, with Tina Marie.
Universally praised. Called entrancing. Just the blend of their voices, the chemistry. The sources also give this duet a lot of credit for helping launch Tina Marie's career further. Shows Rick's role as a mentor, too.
What about the other ballad, Make Love to Me?
Views were more split on that one. The same reviewer who liked Fire and Desire found Make Love to Me less successful. He thought it dragged on a bit, was maybe all seduction without much musical substance compared to the rest.
But a fan perspective offered something else.
Yeah, another fan comment specifically remembered the saxophone on that track, calling it lush and dreamy. So clearly it connected with some listeners on that atmospheric level.
Even the album cover got mentioned, especially the back cover.
Oh, yeah. That picture on the back.
Eh.
Cop's hand kind of on his rear during an arrest. Rick looking back with this raised eyebrow. Described as awesome. One fan said you can almost hear a picture of it. Like it just captures this whole attitude.
Yeah. And the overall fan reaction in the sources just confirms its legendary status. People calling it incredible, a masterpiece, calling Rick a beast, praising his singing very strongly.
Yeah, using some colorful language like he could sing like a meth, quoting directly there from a fan.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that one anecdote from a fan saying they played Rick James infinitely more than Prince in college. That tells you something about the impact he had, placing him right up there with Prince in some fans' minds.
So Street Songs is the peak solo moment, but his influence went beyond just his own records. He became really important for Motown around then.
Hugely important. The sources say he basically became the face of the new Motown in the early 80s. Brought this fresh energy, this modern funk sound to a label that was, transitioning.
And he kept collaborating, too.
Yeah.
Worked with the Temptations, bringing that family connection full circle.
Right, and he was launching other careers. Tina Marie, we mentioned, the Mary Jane Girls, he was producing and mentoring. And he had that massive production hit outside his immediate circle to Eddie Murphy's Party all the time.
Huge song. But while all this success was happening, he was also dealing with competition, right? Rivalries.
Always happens at the top. The sources really focus on the rivalry with Prince, describing Prince as maybe the only other artist at the time who could match Rick's level of funky creativity.
And it got personal sometimes.
Seems like it. The sources mentioned Rick inviting Prince to open for him early on, but then getting annoyed or wankled when Prince started using similar crowd interaction tricks that Rick felt were his. A bit of onstage one-upmanship.
Huh. And beyond artistic rivalries, there were legal fights, too.
The big one being the lawsuit against MC Hammer over Super Freak. Hammer using that bass line for Can't Touch This. That was a major case.
And he also took on the industry itself, specifically MTV.
Yeah, he was vocal about fighting MTV, criticizing them for not playing his videos enough or videos by other black artists. He was calling out that racial bias in music video programming, which was a really big issue back then.
So you've got this picture of him, creative force, hitmaker, mentor, fighter. But the sources also make it really clear that alongside all that, there was a darker side emerging, leading to a pretty serious decline.
Yeah, that brings us to the tough part. The personal struggles, the legal problems, his career fading. The sources are pretty blunt that by the early 90s, his cocaine use was spinning out of control.
It had been there, but it escalated.
Massively. And as he succumbed to drugs through the 90s, his music output dropped off, his popularity really waned. The sources consistently say his drug use and his very public sexual exploits started to overshadow the music itself.
That documentary, Bitchin', touches on this.
It does. One perspective mentioned from it suggests maybe substances played some role in creativity for artists in certain eras, but the film also really confronts the destructive side, the crack era, the impact on families. It kind of positions Rick's career as a time capsule of that difficult time.
And the reality was grim. Sources mention ugly stories about crack binges.
Yeah, things got really dark. And that intense drug use led directly to major legal problems. Frequent run-ins with the law, as the sources put it.
Culminating in very serious charges.
Yes, battling addiction, and then ultimately prison time for sexual assault.
Yeah.
The sources are clear. Convicted of assaulting 2 different women in separate incidents.
And the consequences were huge. 2 years in prison, plus a $2 million civil suit payout. That's life-altering, career-altering.
Definitely. And that Bitchin' documentary apparently explores this difficult territory too, acknowledging his darkest magic, maybe that disturbing side alongside the genius. It doesn't shy away from things like his desire for underage women, even pointing to lyrics in his song 17. So it sounds like a complex but critical look.
And the combined effect of the drugs, the prison time, it effectively ended his mainstream career.
Pretty much. The sources say it was derailed by the drug binges, prison, and record company indifference. The industry moved on, and his personal situation made it almost impossible to come back from.
He did try, though, after getting out of prison in '95.
He did attempt comebacks. The sources acknowledge it, but say they didn't quite work. Too much time had passed, too much damage done, the music scene had changed.
And then health problems piled on top. He had a stroke.
A mild stroke in 1997, yeah, which the sources say basically ended his active music career for good.
So his last big public moment was that BT Awards appearance in 2004.
That's highlighted, yeah. It was meant as a comeback performance, reuniting with Tina Marie. One source called it a memorable cap to his career. And what was really telling was how he played into his renewed fame from somewhere else.
From Dave Chappelle.
Exactly. He actually yelled the catchphrase, "I'm Rick James, bitch," during the show, directly referencing the Chappelle Show's sketch that had suddenly made him famous again in this weird roundabout way. He owned it in that moment.
But sadly, that moment was very near the end.
Tragically, yes. He died relatively young at 56, August 6, 2004, at his home in Burbank. Cause of death was pulmonary and cardiac failure. Lots of contributing factors. It was just 2 months after that BT Awards show.
Which leads us to thinking about his legacy. And it's complicated, isn't it? Especially with that whole Chappelle effect right before he died.
Oh, absolutely. For a whole generation, especially younger people, in 2004, Rick James was the guy from the Chappelle Show sketch. That catchphrase, "I'm Rick James, bitch," kind of defined him for many.
And one source notes that meant, for some, he became more recognized as an icon from a sketch comedy show than he has been as a musician, which, according to another source, some fans felt was really unfair. Like his musical contributions got reduced to a punchline because of his offstage actions and the comedy skit.
Yeah, that overshadowing effect is real. His personal struggles, the drugs, the legal convictions, they undeniably shaped his legacy, created this really complex public image that still exists. He's consistently described as this complicated artist, someone with demons who did vile things, but also had this huge heart and soul in his music.
And the documentary Bitchin' seems to lean into that complexity, talking about his darkest magic alongside the genius. This fury that fueled his sound. It sounds like it doesn't try to smooth over the rough, disturbing parts.
Right. It acknowledges the whole picture.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Despite all of that, The controversies, the caricature, the music still endures. That funk is undeniable.
You see that in the sources. The Stone City Band reunion show in Buffalo years later, fans online still calling him a legend, a beast, recognizing the musical power.
And Street Songs is still held up as a masterpiece. That hasn't faded.
And that idea from the documentary about his career being a time capsule, it really resonates. Albums like Street Songs, tracks like Ghetto Life, they capture not just music, but something about that era, the struggles with addiction, the crack epidemic. That line about his story carrying the stories of those who are missing, that's powerful.
It really is.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the sources push us to see him as more than just the catchphrase or the cautionary tale. He was a massive star, influenced generations, one of the funky forefathers. His whole story, the highs, the lows, the talent, the troubles, it's important to understand not just for the music, but for the complex life behind it and the culture it touched.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Rick James, we're left with this picture of an artist whose legacy is, well, as vibrant and complex as he was.
Yeah, it really forces you to grapple with that idea of separating the art from the artist, or maybe figuring out how they intertwine. The genius in the studio versus the troubled man making terrible choices.
Which leads us right to that provocative thought the sources leave us with, something for you, the listener, to chew on. Rick James's story makes us confront that difficult place where amazing talent meets really profound personal flaws, even vile actions. In our time, where we scrutinize public figures so much, his lasting music next to his messy history raises the big question. How do we deal with art made by people whose lives had serious moral failures? And what role does the audience play in shaping how that artist is remembered?
It's a tough one. No easy answers. And the sources on Rick James really bring it right to the surface. We've traced his path, from Buffalo streets, going AWOL to Motown star, the phenomenon of street songs, the fall into addiction and prison, and how he's remembered now.
Yeah, going through these sources, pulling out the different takes, it paints a really rich, sometimes difficult, but fascinating picture. We hope walking you through this material has been valuable, maybe giving you a deeper understanding of Rick James beyond just the surface stuff. And if you did find this deep dive useful, please think about subscribing so you don't miss future explorations. And, liking and commenting always helps other people find these conversations too.
Thank you for joining us for this look into the sources on Rick James.
Thank you for listening to VSOW.